Big Pharma. They make billions every year, but are they really looking out for our health? We rely on their medications, we trust their research. But what happens when that trust is broken? Every year, there are countless stories about hidden side effects and dangerous cover-ups. But then we see those same drugs advertised on TV, promising us a better life. Something doesn't add up. So what's the truth about Big Pharma? How to put a stop to their aggression and make them put human lives over profit? Well, today, we, the big picture, are diving deep into the world of Big Pharma, uncovering the scandals, exposing the risks, and exploring solutions for a healthier future. One of the most heartbreaking stories linked to Big Pharma is the opioid crisis. But the real question is, how did we get here? Well, at the center of it all was Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin. Back in the late 1990s, Purdue was on a mission to revolutionize pain management. So they aggressively marketed OxyContin, claiming it was a safer, less addictive painkiller. But that wasn't the truth. Behind the scenes, Purdue knew the drug was highly addictive. Yet, instead of prioritizing public safety, they chose profits. Doctors, trusting Purdue's claims, prescribed OxyContin widely. And then came the aftermath. Addiction spread across America like wildfire. Families were shattered. Lives were destroyed. And people who were simply trying to manage pain, now trapped in a vicious cycle of dependence. The crisis spiraled out of control, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives through overdose. In 2007, Purdue Pharma finally admitted its wrongdoing. They paid a $634 million fine for misbranding the drug. But for many families, the damage was irreparable. Even today, the opioid epidemic continues to devastate lives. Over 500,000 deaths have been linked to opioid overdoses since the crisis began. It's a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of corporate greed. Purdue wasn't the only one to blame. Companies like Johnson & Johnson and Teva Pharmaceutical, driven by profit, downplayed the dangers of OxyContin and flooded communities with it. Sure, the lawsuits brought some accountability, but the damage had already been done. Next, we have scandals related to vaccines. During the COVID-19 pandemic, scientists raced against time to develop life-saving vaccines. In this fight, Pfizer, Moderna, and BioNTech emerged as heroes, offering a beacon of hope to the world. But there's a twist in the story. They prioritized wealthier nations and left low-income countries behind. Despite receiving significant public funding, these companies held on to their vaccine formulas like precious secrets. They refused to share, leaving low-income countries with little access. Just imagine a world where the wealthiest nations are protected, while the poorest are left vulnerable. It's not a dystopian nightmare, but the reality. For instance, Pfizer and BioNTech delivered less than 1% of their vaccines to poorer nations. Meanwhile, Moderna provided just 0.2%. But these companies were making massive profits, $65,000 per minute. Yet, most of the world's poorest people stayed unvaccinated. This stark contrast is hard to ignore, but calls to share the technology and waive intellectual property rights were met with resistance. This highlights how profit motives often overshadow global health needs. Big Pharma's relentless pursuit of profit has also led to unethical drug trials. Yes, they've been treating human lives as just statistics, just to make a few bucks. One such shocking example is the 1996 meningitis outbreak in Nigeria. Pfizer saw an opportunity, not to help, but to experiment. They swooped in with an experimental antibiotic called Troven, and they tested it on children without proper consent from their families. Imagine the horror. Vulnerable children already battling a deadly disease becoming unwitting subjects in a deadly experiment. The results were devastating. Many participants suffered severe side effects, and tragically, some lost their lives. The world was outraged. Critics accused Pfizer of treating human lives as expendable, prioritizing profit over the well-being of innocent children. Pfizer eventually paid $75 million to settle the case, a paltry sum compared to the suffering inflicted. Cutting corners has become a very common trick in Big Pharma's profit play. Merck, another pharmaceutical giant and producer of Vioxx, faced backlash for it. Merck knew Vioxx was linked to heart attacks and strokes, but chose to bury the truth. For years, they continued to market and sell the drug to millions, putting countless lives at risk. It was only in 2004 that the truth finally emerged, and only then Vioxx was pulled from the market. But by then, thousands had suffered or died, unfortunate victims of Merck's deceit. Merck paid $4.85 billion in settlements, a significant sum, but not enough for the irreversible pain they brought upon families. Now, if you want a clear example of Big Pharma's greed affecting millions, it's the price of insulin. You ever seen one of these? A vial of insulin. Looks pretty basic, right? But for people with diabetes, it's literally a miracle drug. This life-saving medication has been around for nearly a century, and it costs pennies to produce. But then, something changed. Over the last 2 decades, the price has skyrocketed, in some cases by over 1,000%. It's a wild story. Major insulin makers, companies like Eli Lilly, Sanofi, and Novo Nordisk, have been accused of price gouging. They've gotten so greedy, they're literally putting people's lives at risk. For those with diabetes, insulin isn't optional, it's life or death. But so many patients are being priced out. They're forced to ration their doses, putting themselves in danger of serious complications, even death. There are countless stories of people dying because they simply couldn't afford their insulin. It's outrageous. These companies have manipulated the market, giving them the power to set whatever price they want, for no reason. How can we let this continue? And it's not just about one drug or one company. It's a whole system designed to put profits before people. A system that allows Big Pharma to control the prices of life-saving medications. Remember the EpiPen? That little device that can mean the difference between life and death for someone with a severe allergy? Mylan, the company behind it, raised the price by over 400% in just a few years. Parents were suddenly scrambling to afford something their kids needed to survive. How can something so essential become a luxury? And then there's Martin Shkreli, the poster child for Big Pharma greed. He became infamous for hiking the price of Daraprim, a drug for a parasitic infection, by an unbelievable 5,000%. Overnight, one pill went from $13.50 to $750. These stories may be shocking, but they're not isolated incidents. They expose a deeply flawed system that gives Big Pharma the power to control drug prices with no regard for the people who need them. Now, Big Pharma's scandals aren't just about high prices. They're also about manipulating information to protect profits. During the opioid crisis, companies deliberately downplayed how addictive their drugs were. They put profits before the well-being of millions, fueling a devastating epidemic. Remember Vioxx? When dangers of that drug came to light, the company behind it initially denied the findings. They delayed action that could have saved thousands of lives. And it just doesn't stop there. Pharmaceutical companies often fund studies that make their products look good, even if the data isn't completely accurate. This creates confusion and makes it difficult for doctors and patients to make informed decisions about their health. Not to mention, Big Pharma's actions have real and devastating consequences for patients. For many, the cost of medicine is simply unaffordable. People living with chronic illnesses like diabetes face impossible choices. Buy food or buy the medications that keep them alive. The skyrocketing price of insulin has forced some to ration their doses, putting their health at serious risk. It's not just a problem in the US, where families spend over $500 billion on prescription drugs every year. It's a global issue. People around the world are forced to skip doses or forgo their medication entirely because they can't afford it. But it's not just about the money. When drug companies prioritize profits over people, it erodes their trust in the healthcare system. When patients see companies hiking prices or concealing risks, they start to question their doctors. They wonder if the medications they're prescribed are truly in their best interest, or if they're being influenced by Big Pharma's marketing tactics. So, now it's time to fight back against Big Pharma's greed and make healthcare work for everyone, not just the wealthy. Here's how. First, governments should force drug companies to reveal the true cost of developing and manufacturing their medications. This transparency would stop them from charging high prices for flimsy reasons. Now, we know that generic drugs are just as effective as brand-name medications, but cost a fraction of the price. So governments should make generics more accessible, especially in developing countries, to lighten the financial load of healthcare. Pharmaceutical companies must face consequences for exploitative practices like price gouging and concealing drug risks. Lawsuits, like against those involved in the opioid crisis, can provide much-needed resources to communities ravaged by corporate greed. These companies should be held criminally liable for their harmful actions. Another troubling issue is current patent laws allow companies to extend their monopolies and block the production of cheaper generic alternatives. Reforming these laws would open the door to more affordable medications. It would also increase access to life-saving treatments. Not to mention, countries with universal healthcare systems, such as Canada and Norway, often have lower drug prices because the government negotiates directly with pharmaceutical companies. This model prioritizes patient well-being over corporate profits and ensures that everyone has access to the healthcare they need. And that's it for today's video. So, now we have a clear understanding of what needs to be done. By exposing Big Pharma's practices and holding them accountable, we can push for a healthcare system that truly serves the public. This means demanding fairer drug prices, ensuring transparency in research, and creating policies that put people's health first. Only by taking action can we begin to fix a system that currently prioritizes profit over patients' well-being. It's time for a change, and it starts with understanding the issues at hand. So, what are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it, and subscribe for more. And if you want to learn more about this topic and see a video about how Big Pharma actually operates, make sure you check out this video next. As always, thanks for watching.